Welcome back. We're unpacking one of the most pivotal yet honestly darkest chapters in human history. We're looking at a story that doesn't kick off on a traditional battlefield. No, it starts in the shadows. We're exploring the devastating cost of nuclear power. It's a profound shift in human capability that, well, still hangs over us today. Think about the middle of the 20th century. Humanity crossed a line it could literally never return from. And what's really fascinating, or maybe terrifying, is how this happened. This wasn't some line crossed in an open battle or during a heavily televised political revolution. Actually, it happened in absolute secrecy, inside hidden laboratories, safely tucked away behind locked doors, completely far from the public eye. And, the tragic irony of this whole era is just profound. The scientists involved, they sincerely believed they were driving ultimate human progress. Governments thought they were just taking necessary steps to protect national security. But what they were actually creating was one of the most horrifying experiments in human history. They were unleashing consequences, both physical and deeply psychological, that still haunt our world today. Notice how incredibly fast this whole thing progressed. The year is 1939. Europe is collapsing into chaos, and scientists discover that splitting a tiny, microscopic particle inside the atom can unleash just unimaginable energy. Boom. This triggers a frantic, highly secretive race. The United States launches the Manhattan Project in the early 1940s to harness this energy before Nazi Germany can. By the mid-1940s, they've built entire secret cities solely for this research. The crazy part? The workers building these cities had absolutely no idea what they were actually creating, thanks to extreme security and mandatory silence. So, what was the Manhattan Project really? It was a massive, top-secret operation that essentially gathered the most brilliant scientific minds on the planet. Physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer was right there among them. And the psychology here is absolutely essential. Many of these brilliant minds truly, deeply believed they were working to save the world from fascism. Yet deep down, they carried this terrifying fear that they were opening the gates to a power humanity could never actually learn to control. And that exact fear, it was tested on July 16, 1945. Everything they had worked for culminated in the deserts of New Mexico with humanity's very first nuclear experiment, the Trinity Test. At 5:29 in the morning, the bomb exploded. For a brief, terrifying moment, the night sky turned brighter than the midday sun. A massive fireball erupted upwards, and a shockwave surged outward with such intense force that it shattered windows miles and miles away. Observers literally thought the world was ending. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." That's a line from ancient scripture that Oppenheimer later recalled thinking in that exact blinding moment. Just let that sink in for a second. In the face of that flash, some scientists cheered at their success, but others, they just stood frozen, utterly in silence, hit with the chilling realization that they had just engineered the power of mass destruction on a completely unprecedented scale. And the truly terrifying part is that the Trinity Test was only the beginning. Just weeks later, this experiment became a devastating reality. On August 6, 1945, an American bomber dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima, Japan. Within seconds, the city disappeared in fire. Buildings instantly melted. Then, just 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The visual evidence of this destruction was entirely surreal. The heat was so intense and the destruction so instantaneous that the shadows of human beings were literally burned into the surviving walls. We are talking about instant, unimaginable destruction where thousands upon thousands died in the blink of an eye, and countless others suffered horrific injuries. To put this into perspective, we really need to grasp the sheer scale of the immediate human cost. By the end of those two bombings, over 200,000 people were dead. 200,000. It's a staggering figure that forever altered the course of human history. But as horrific as that immediate death toll was, the survivors were about to face a lingering aftermath that literally no one fully grasped at the time. They were about to face the unseen terror of radiation. People who looked completely unharmed by the initial blast suddenly became violently sick. Their hair fell out, their skin burned, and tragically, even years later, children were born with severe deformities. This just proves how profoundly blind we were. Humanity had eagerly entered the atomic age, but nobody truly understood the long-term invisible dangers they had just unlocked.
So let's look at the next phase, the Cold War escalation, a deadly global competition.
Now, you might think that after witnessing the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world would take a collective step back, right? Well, the exact opposite happened. The terrifying experiments didn't stop, they accelerated. The United States and the Soviet Union rushed to build larger, increasingly powerful nuclear weapons. This was a terrifying geopolitical escalation. Both superpowers began turning entire islands, vast oceans, and remote desert territories into their own personal testing grounds. And some of these bombs, they were hundreds of times stronger than the one dropped on Hiroshima.
To really understand the absurd scale of this escalation, consider this number, 40 miles high. That was the height of the mushroom cloud produced by the Soviet Tsar Bomba test. It remains the most powerful explosion ever created by humans. The energy released was so massive that the shockwave from the blast literally circled the Earth.
So, what did this mean for the everyday person? Well, daily life in the atomic age was defined by a constant, lingering fear of sudden nuclear war. It wasn't just abstract politics happening far away. It was embedded in your daily routine. Schools routinely taught young children to hide under their wooden desks in the event of an attack, as if that would help. Families spent their hard-earned savings building underground bunkers right in their backyards. For decades, humanity lived with the very real, very present fear that civilization could just end in a matter of minutes. But behind all that public fear was an even darker truth. See, many of these massive experiments were conducted without fully understanding the consequences. Soldiers were intentionally placed near nuclear blast zones just to see what would happen. Entire civilian communities were exposed to radioactive fallout, often without ever being warned about the invisible dangers raining down on them. And the legacy of this invisible destruction is profound. Years later, those affected regions saw severe increases in cancer rates. Scientists soon discovered that this radiation didn't just fade away after a while. No, it poisoned the land, it poisoned the water, and it embedded itself as a persistent threat to future generations. Once released, this radiation could not simply be erased from the environment. And we see the echoes of this danger even outside of weapons testing. Tragic modern events at Chernobyl and Fukushima serve as really stark reminders to the world. They show us exactly how dangerous nuclear energy can become when we lose control of it. Humanity undoubtedly unlocked incredible power, but as we've seen throughout this explainer, it came with a terrifying, lasting cost. So, what should you take away from all of this? I think it all comes down to a core philosophical conflict: intelligence versus wisdom. The nuclear experiment wasn't just terrifying because of the raw science. It was terrifying because of what it revealed about us as a species. Our intelligence advanced much, much faster than our collective wisdom. We discovered exactly how to destroy the world long before we learned how to truly protect it. And remember, this isn't just some history lesson. Thousands of nuclear weapons still exist today, right now, sitting in silos and submarines around the world. These arsenals are powerful enough to end human civilization many times over. The threat we've been discussing, it's still very much a part of our present reality. Which leads us to this pretty sobering realization. History has shown us something incredibly dangerous. The greatest threat to humanity has never been nature. It has always been humanity itself. We are the architects of our own potential destruction, holding the keys to a power that we clearly still struggle to master.
And that leaves us with one final haunting question to ponder. Could it happen again? If humanity was capable of creating and using the most destructive force in history once, are we wise enough now to ensure it never happens again? I want you to think about that, because some events from our past are simply too important to ever forget, and some experiments should never, ever be repeated. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.